Welcome back to the live reading of live reading of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz with intentions of a mastermind book club. My name is Alyssa Luce, and we're so happy to have you on. Today, we're picking up on Chapter 11, How to Unlock Your Real Personality. It's been really interesting so far, so let's jump right in. Let's see. I'm good. I hope you guys are doing good too. Alright. So, self-consciousness is really others' consciousness. Self-consciousness is really others' consciousness. The cause and effect relationship between excessive negative feedback and what we call self-consciousness can be readily seen. In any sort of social relationship, we constantly receive negative feedback data from other people. A smile, a frown, 100 different subtle clues of approval or disapproval, interest or lack of interest, continually advise us of how we're doing. Whether we're getting across, whether we're hitting or missing the mark, so to speak, in any sort of social situation, there is a constant interaction going on between speaker and listener, actor and observer. And without this constant communication back and forth, human relations and social activities would be virtually impossible. And if not impossible, certainly dull, boring, non-inspiring, and dead without sparks. Good actors and actresses and public speakers can sense this communication from the audience, and it helps them to perform better. Persons with good personalities who are popular and magnetic in social situations can sense this communication from other people, and they automatically and spontaneously react and respond to it in a creative way. The communication from other people is used as negative feedback and enables the person to perform better socially. Unless a person can respond to this communication from other people, he is a cold fish type. The reserved personality who does not warm up to other people. Without this communication, you become a social dud. The hard to get to know type who interests no one. However, this type of negative feedback to be effective should be creative. That is, it should be more or less subconscious and automatic and spontaneous, rather than consciously contrived or thought about. What others think creates inhibition. When you become too consciously concerned about what others think, when you become too careful to consciously try to please other people, when you become too sensitive to the real or fancied disapproval of other people, then you have excessive negative feedback, inhibition, and poor performance. Whenever you constantly and continuously monitor your every act, word, or manner, again, you become inhibited and self-conscious. You become too careful to make a good impression, and in doing so, show off, restrain, inhibit your creative self, and end up making a rather poor impression. The way to make a good impression in other people is never consciously try to make a good impression on them. Never act or fail to act purely for consciously contrived effect. Never wonder consciously what the other person is thinking of you, how he is judging you. Mm. I'm telling you, that's how I have to be on these lives, because I could be overthinking about what everyone else thinks, if I'm doing it right, if I'm doing it perfect. But then I wouldn't even show up for myself, and then no one would benefit from the value that this book has to offer. So, how a salesman cured self-consciousness. James Manigan, the famous salesman, author, and lecturer, says that when he first left home, he was painfully self-conscious, especially when eating in the dining room of a ritzy or high-class hotel. As he walked through the dining room, he felt that every eye was upon him, judging him, critical of him. He was painfully conscious of his every movement, motion, and act. In the way he walked, the way he sat down, his table manners, and the way he ate his food. All of these actions seemed stiff and awkward. Why was he so ill at ease? He asked himself. He knew he had good table manners and knew enough social etiquette to get by. Why did he never feel self-conscious and ill at ease when eating in the kitchen with Ma and Pa? He decided it was because when he was eating with Ma and Pa, he did not think or bother to wonder how he was acting. He was neither careful nor self-critical. He was not concerned about producing an effect. He had felt composed, relaxed, and had done all right. James Madigan cured his self-consciousness by remembering how he had felt and how he had acted. When he was going to the kitchen to eat with Ma and Pa, then he walked into the ritzy dining room. He would imagine and pretend that he was going to eat with Ma and Pa and act that way. I need water a lot today, guys. No, but it's really true. The way you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're always self-conscious, you're always going to be doing things, overthinking, worried, and anxious. Versus if you're always comfortable, you'll be able to do things with ease and relax. Perfect. Okay. Poise comes when you ignore excessive negative feedback. Manigan also found that he could overcome his stage fright and self-consciousness when calling upon big shots to win any social situation by saying to himself, I'm going to eat with Ma and Pa. Conjuring up his imagination how he had felt and how he had acted, and then acting that way. In his book, The Knack of Selling Yourself, Manigan advises salespeople to use the I'm going to home to eat supper with my Ma and Pa. I've been through this 1,000 times. Nothing new can happen here. Attitude in all sorts of new and strange situations. This attitude of being immune to strangers or strange situations, this total disregard for all the unknown and expected, has a name. It's called poise. Poise is the deliberate shunning aside of all fears arising from new and uncontrollable circumstances. I like that. Poise is the deliberate shunting aside of all fears arising from new and uncontrollable circumstances. You need to be more self-conscious. The late Dr. Edward Wigham, famous educator, psychologist, and lecturer, said that in his early years, he was so painfully self-conscious, he found it all but impossible to recite in school. He avoided other people and could not talk to them without hanging his head. He constantly fought his self-consciousness and tried hard to overcome it, all to no avail. Then one day he got a new idea. His trouble was not self-consciousness at all. It was really excessive, others' consciousness. He was too painfully sensitive to what others might think of everything he said or did, every move he made. This tied him up in knots. He could not think clearly, and he could not think of nothing to say. He did not feel this way when he was alone with himself. When alone, he was perfectly calm and relaxed, at ease, poised, and he could think of lots of interesting ideas and things to say. And he was also perfectly aware of and at home with himself. Then he stopped fighting and trying to conjure his self-consciousness, and instead concentrated on developing more self-consciousness. Feeling, acting, behaving, thinking as he did when he was alone, without any regard to how some other person might feel about or judge him. This total disregard for opinion and judgment of other people did not result in his becoming callous, arrogant, or entirely insensitive to others. There is no danger of entirely eradicating negative feedback, no matter how hard you may try. But this effort in the opposite direction did tone down his overly sensitive feedback mechanism. He got along better with other people and went on to make his living counseling people and making public speeches to large groups without the slightest degree of self-consciousness. Conscious do make cowards of us all. So said Shakespeare. And so said modern-day psychiatrists and enlightened ministers. Conscience itself is a learned negative feedback mechanism having to do with morals and ethics. If the learned and stored data is correct concerning what is right and what is wrong, and if the feedback mechanism is not overly sensitive but realistic, the result is just as any other goal-striving situation. We are relieved from the burden of having to decide constantly as to what is right and wrong. Consciousness steers us or guides us down the straight and narrow to the goal of correct, appropriate, and realistic behavior insofar as ethics and morals are concerned. Conscience works automatically and subconsciously, as does any other feedback system. However, as Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick says, your conscience can fool you. Your conscience itself can be wrong. It depends upon your own basic beliefs concerning right and wrong. If your basic beliefs are true, realistic, and sensible, conscience becomes a valuable ally in dealing with the real world and in sailing upon the ethical sea. It acts as a compass, which keeps you out of trouble, as a mariner's compass keeps him off of the reefs. But if your basic beliefs are themselves wrong, untrue, unrealistic, or nonsensible, these declinate your compass and get it off true north, just as magnetic bits of metal can disturb the compass of the mariner and guide him into trouble rather than away from it. Conscience can mean many things to many people. If you are brought up to believe, as some people are, that it is sinful to wear buttons on your clothes, your conscience will bother you when you do. If you are brought up to believe that cutting off another human's head, shrinking it, and hanging it on your wall is right, proper, and a sign of manhood, then you will feel guilt, guilty, unworthy, and undeserving if you haven't managed to shrink a head. Head shrinking savages would no doubt call this a sin of omission. That's hilarious. Okay. Conscience job is to make you happy, not miserable. The purpose of conscience is to help us. The purpose of conscience is to help make us happy and productive, not the other way around. But if we are to let our conscience be our guide, our conscience must be based upon truth. It must point to true north. Otherwise, blindly obeying conscience can only get us into trouble rather than out of it and make us unhappy and unproductive into the bargain. Self-expression is not a moral issue. Much mischief results from our taking a moral position on matters which are not basically moral matters at all. For example, self-expression or lack of it is not basically an ethical question, aside from the fact that it is our duty to use the talents which our Creator gave us. Yet self-expression may become morally wrong as far as your conscience is concerned. If you were squelched, shut up, shamed, humiliated, or perhaps punished as a child for speaking up, expressing your ideas, or showing off, such a child learns that it is wrong to express himself, to hold himself out as having any worthwhile ideas, or perhaps to speak at all. If a child is punished for showing anger, or shamed too much for showing fear, or perhaps made fun of for showing love, he learns that expressing his real feelings is wrong. Some children learn that it is sinful or wrong only to express the bad emotions, anger and fear. But when you inhibit bad emotions, you also inhibit the expression of good emotions. And the yardstick for judging emotions is not goodness or badness as such, but the appropriateness and inappropriateness. It is appropriate for the man who meets the bears on the trail to experience fear. It is appropriate to experience anger if there is a legitimate need to destroy an obstacle by sheer force and destructiveness. Properly directed and controlled anger is an important element to courage. If every time a child comes up with an opinion, he is squelched and put in his place, he learns that it is right for him to be nobody, to be wrong, to want to be a somebody. Such a distorted and unrealistic conscience does indeed make cowards of us all. We can become overly sensitive and become too carefully concerned with whether we have a right to succeed in even a worthwhile endeavor. We become too carefully concerned about whether or no, I deserve this. Many people, inhibited by the wrong kind of conscience, hold back or take a back seat in any kind of endeavor, even in church activities. They secretly feel it would not be right for them to hold themselves out as a leader or presume to be somebody, or they are overly concerned with whether other people might think they were showing off. Stage fright is a common and universal phenomenon. It becomes understandable when seen as excessive negative feedback coming from a declinated consciousness. Stage fright is the fear that we will be punished for speaking up, expressing our own opinion, presuming to be somebody, or showing off. Things which most of us learned were wrong and punishable as a child. Stage fright illustrates how universal is the suppression and inhibition of self expression. Disinhibition, a long step in the opposite direction. If you are among the millions who suffer unhappiness and failure because of inhibition, you need to deliberately practice disinhibition. You need to practice being less careful, less concerned, less conscientious. You need to practice speaking before you think instead of thinking before you speak. Acting without thinking instead of thinking or considering carefully before you act. Commonly, when I advise a patient to practice disinhibition, and the most inhibited object the most, I'm likely to hear something like this. But surely we do not think that we need to exercise no care at all, no concern, no worry about results. It seems to me that the world needs a certain amount of inhibition. Otherwise, we would live like savages and civilized society would collapse. If we express ourselves without any restraint, freely expressing our feelings, we would go around punching people in the nose who disagree with us. Yes, I say you are correct. The world does need a certain amount of inhibition, but not you. The key words are a certain amount. You have such an excessive amount of inhibition. You are like a patient running a temperature of 108 degrees, who says, but surely heat is necessary for health. Man is a warm-blooded animal and cannot live without a certain amount of temperature. We all need temperature. Yet you are telling me that I should concentrate completely and certainly and entirely on reducing my temperature and ignore the danger of not having any temperature? The stutterer, who is already so tied up with moral tension, excessive negative feedback, self-critical analysis, and inhibition, that he cannot talk at all, is prone to argue in the same way when told to totally ignore negative feedback and self-criticism. He can cite you numerous proverbs, apothegms, and the like to prove that one should think before he speaks, that an idle and careless tongue gets you in trouble, and that one should be very careful of what he says and how he says it, because good speech is important, and a word spoken cannot be recalled. All that he is saying, in effect, is that negative feedback is a useful and beneficial thing, but not for him. When he totally ignores negative feedback by either being deafened by a loud tone or by shadow talk, he speaks correctly. Alright, I'm going to pause it here because I already know Joy and I have so much great feedback for today's chapter. How are you, Joy?
Hi, I'm great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm good. How you doing today? You muted, mommy. You still muted. Oh,
Thank you. I was
okay.
saying, I love this quote here. Poise
Is
is
that good?
deliberately shunting aside of all fears arising from new and uncontrollable circumstances. And for me, I have a background in the arts, and there was a point in time that I was really interested in building my modeling portfolio, so I would go to all these castings and workshops, and one of the words that was constantly used to describe models was poise. And it's that understanding that, as a model, you're always going to be put in situations that are new. You're always going to be put in front of new people that don't know you, yet you're hoping and praying and wishing that these people see the potential in you, see the benefit of working with you. And so just that fear of new and uncontrollable circumstances, and your ability to work through them without, showing that fear, that nervousness, or any kind of doubt in yourself. That is poise. And we can all think of models that exude that and exhibit that. And maybe even someone in your life that they're constantly moving with a sense of poise in their life. And we kind of want to know, how are they doing that? And it really is this idea of not caring, of not worrying or overthinking what other people think about us, or what other people may say about us, or what other people may feel about us, because everyone is too busy thinking about themselves to think about you. And I feel like once you truly understand that everyone has this, running commentary in their mind about what they're doing, and would never put attention on someone else, because you can't multitask in your mind. I feel like we would have a lot more peace in our own self, because it really is all the thoughts of criticism from others that create this self-conscious feeling and experience that many people deal with. So how are you feeling about today's reading, Joy?
Yes, I love that. And thank you for lifting that up about poise and um, bringing it back to it's actually others' consciousness that makes up quote unquote self consciousness. And what's coming up for me is the human design perspective with it. Like, I thought about, so the first concept that came up was like, wow, that is so deep, because it really, if you, one perspective of that really drives home just how much oneness is a real thing. Like, we think it's our own selves that is causing us to second guess or overthink it or not say what we want to say, but it's really the perceived judgment of something outside of us that really is also part of us anyway. And is that why it matters so much? Is that all part of the game of being human, to really understand that and then master it, so that we not only release those inhibitions, but in doing so, we truly start to embrace the idea of oneness, because we start to understand that everyone else is a reflection of us anyway.
Indeed. And I loved how it brought up that idea of, there is no good or bad, and you cannot inhibit bad emotions, because you'll also inhibit the expression of good emotions. And I automatically thought of that TED Talk with Brene Brown about vulnerability. So if you guys haven't watched that TED Talk yet, this is the third time bringing it up, because it really does highlight what people may be experiencing, with these feelings of consciousness, of guilt, of, their inability to feel good as often as possible. It's probably because you've learned that it's normal to avoid those bad feelings, yet you can never live fully if you're trying to selectively numb your emotions. And lastly, I also really loved that everything is learned negative feedback, right? This feeling of consciousness. Therefore, if you learn how to be self-conscious because of what other people have taught you, you can learn how to not be self-conscious just by, reading books like Psycho-Cybernetics, or by watching people who are poised, or, have what you want. You can definitely relearn any type of attitude and habit that you want. So just knowing that it's not who you are. This is just learned behavior that has been normalized. So, any other comments you want to add today, Joy?
Yes, I was just thinking the exact same thing. It's not that you are it's from the human design perspective, it's about deconditioning and realizing that the thing about deconditioning though is that we like you said, we are taught that it's normal to feel that way. So once it becomes so normal, it becomes what we think our truth is. But it is someone else's truth that they gave us. And just like you said, you can unlearn it. You can decondition from it. I was brought up to think. I was brought up to be self-conscious about being late. I was brought up to be feel self-conscious about not returning someone's phone call right away. You know what I'm saying? And now I don't hold on to those feelings anymore about what are they going to say if I walk in late. Everyone's going to be looking at me. So what? Look at me. I look cute today too. Maybe you'll get an idea.
Amen. I look cute today too. Celebrate it with me.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So it definitely is about the conditioning of it. And I was thinking from the other thing from the human design perspective is like when you have open centers, it's not energy that is yours sustainably. So the energy that visits those centers filters in and out, but it's not yours. So you're constantly, if you're unaware, you're constantly wondering and second guessing and having thoughts about things that have nothing to do with you really. And the wisdom of having open centers is to just know that that's what's going on, and you can, borrow energy for a while or play around with it for a little while, but it doesn't have to be yours. So we can release all of those additional questions about all these things that have nothing to do with us.
That is amazing. And you just inspired me to go back and review my chart again, because I definitely had a lot of open centers, but I also had a lot of defined centers, and I definitely do feel myself following more of those defined centers. But in those moments where I'm like, I'll be willing to take advice from others, and it really does align with that chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know what we're talking about, make sure you check out Joy's website, City John Living.
cityjohn.com.
Okay, cityjohn.com, and you could get a free human design chart downloaded. And then if you want a reading and actual description, you could definitely book some time with Joy. She's super knowledgeable about human design and will just open your eyes to the possibilities and the potential you really have. So thank you, Joy, for being here and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that. I appreciate your words, and I love doing this work. So yes, come on through, y'all. Let's talk about it.
Yes. All right, guys. I love you, and we'll talk again in the next reading. Bye.
Peace, y'all.